Imagine traveling halfway across the country, hoping to become a cherished wife, only to have your hopes shattered in front of strangers who judge you on sight. That was Eliza Thompson's fate. The moment she set foot in Maple Creek, Texas, rejected for her figure and mocked by gossiping townsfolk, she nearly gave up on her dream of finding a real home. But just as she braced herself for more heartache, a wealthy ranch owner noticed what others had missed: Eliza's sharp mind and fierce determination. Working side by side, the two exposed a plotting rival, determined to ruin the ranch, and discovered a connection stronger than society's scorn. Does love really conquer prejudice? Or will old grudges destroy their fragile alliance? Follow Eliza's battle against narrow-minded whispers and learn how she tames not just an untamed frontier, but also the guarded heart of a man who sees her true worth. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support brings more stories where love defies doubt and inner strength triumphs over idle talk. Eliza Thompson clutched a worn newspaper clipping as the train rattled westward across miles of golden prairie. The clipping, with its softened edges, had offered the promise of something she yearned for: a fresh start. It read, "Mail order bride sought in Maple Creek, Texas. Territory. Prospective. Suitor Philip Wilcox, proprietor. Must be of upright character, ready for frontier life. Church reference required." Sitting in her cramped Boston apartment weeks ago, Eliza had stared at those words until they blurred, wondering if the West held the key to a life unburdened by the assumptions people made about her, simply because she was, as they frequently pointed out, too large. Her parents, long deceased, had left her only a few small heirlooms: a cameo brooch, a Bible with her mother's scrawled notes in the margins, and an iron-strong determination never to let anyone shrink her spirit. Now, as farmland gave way to raw, open expanses, Eliza traced her memories in her mind. She recalled the sideways glances at socials in Boston, the subtle cruelty disguised as concern. She'd be so lovely if she weren't so substantial. That was the word they used: substantial, as though her existence were a burden. No matter that she excelled in her teaching position, no matter that she had a heart for music and poetry, her shape rendered her invisible to genuine admiration. So when a letter arrived from a certain Philip Wilcox, a man who described himself as a successful merchant in a growing township, she had clung to his polite words like a lifeline. His letters, though formal, spoke of building a future with someone who could manage accounts, handle social duties, and stand alongside him with dignity. He never requested a photograph, and Eliza had decided not to volunteer one, both out of shyness, in the hope that he would see her true self before judging her appearance. She pressed her face to the train's window, watching the rolling grasslands pass, occasionally dotted with ranches that sprawled under a sky bigger than she'd ever imagined. The further west they went, the more her old life seemed to slip from her grasp. She'd said her goodbyes to her one-bedroom apartment, traded the clamor of Boston's carriages and busybodies for the hush of the prairies. The future, though terrifying, was at least a realm where she could hope to be valued for her capabilities. Not her silhouette. A few seats away, she noticed a young mother traveling alone with a toddler, the child fussing from restlessness. Eliza offered the woman a kind smile, rummaging in her handbag for a piece of peppermint candy. She handed it to the little boy, earning a grateful nod from his mother. This small gesture steadied Eliza's nerves. She could still be of use to others, even as she battled her own fears. The train gave a lurch, and the conductor announced Maple Creek would be the next stop. Her heart pounded at the name she'd repeated in her head countless times. This was the place where Philip Wilcox was expecting his bride. Would he greet her warmly, recognized only by the yellow rose pinned to her traveling dress? Or would he recoil the way so many had done before, resolving to meet her destiny head-on? Eliza collected her small trunk in the hat box that held her mother's cameo. The train screeched and hissed as it pulled into the tiny wooden station. Outside, the setting sun cast everything in honeyed light. With a final tremor, the train halted, and Eliza Thompson stepped onto the dusty platform of Maple Creek, unprepared for the whirlwind of prejudice and possibilities that would soon unfold. The first thing Eliza noticed was the smell: a dry, slightly sweet scent of sun-baked earth mixed with the faint tang of livestock. A scattering of buildings lined the single dusty street that appeared to make up Maple Creek's core. She spotted a blacksmith's forge, a boarding house, and a humble church that stood with its faded steeple pointing stoically skyward. The station's manager, a wiry man with sun-etched features, offered a tip of his hat before hauling her trunk onto the rickety wooden sidewalk. A small group had gathered, curious souls who always came to see the newcomers stepping off the train. Eliza felt their gazes, some openly assessing, some politely averted. She swallowed, summoning the polite dignity she'd honed back in Boston. The old advertisement had said Philip Wilcox, proprietor of Wilcox Mercantile. She scanned the faces for a man who might look the part, distinguished, maybe wearing a waistcoat or a tie. Miss Thompson, a voice inquired. A short, bespectacled man stepped forward, wearing a crisp apron over a stiff-collared shirt. His expression was one of immediate bewilderment that he failed to hide. Eliza nodded, mustering a smile. Yes, I'm Eliza Thompson. Are you Mr. Wilcox? His brow furrowed, and with hardly a moment to spare, he appeared to lose the ability to speak. He coughed twice, then rasped, I'm Mr. Wilcox. Yes, but I'm sorry, I must confirm. Are you truly the woman I've been corresponding with these past months? A murmur rippled through the small crowd, and Eliza felt her cheeks burn. She lifted her chin a fraction higher. I am, she said calmly. I've come as you requested. Wilcox's eyes flicked from her face to her full-figured form, and Eliza read the shifting emotions there. Shock, judgment, a flicker of anger. He coughed again, glancing around to see how many onlookers were enthralled by the scene. There must be some misunderstanding, he stammered, too rattled to keep his voice low. Your letters made certain impressions that do not align with this appearance, she asked quietly. Finishing the sentence, he seemed too cowardly to voice. The hush among the bystanders intensified. A few turned away, embarrassed by Wilcox's crude reaction. A trio of older women smirked openly. Eliza felt tears threaten, but she locked her spine. She was done apologizing for existing. Wilcox drew himself up, took a breath, and declared in a tone that was all performance. I regret to say, Miss Thompson, that your figure makes you unsuitable for the social ambitions I hold. It would be unpresentable. I wish you a safe return east, but I have no intention of marrying you. An audible gasp arose from those gathered. Eliza felt each word like the sting of a lash, but she refused to lower her gaze. If Boston taught her anything, it was how to withstand humiliation and remain steadfast. She inhaled, turned, and calmly said, If that is your decision, Mr. Wilcox, then I wish you the best. I trust you will do the same for me. Confused murmurs erupted among the crowd. Wilcox, red-faced, spun on his heel and stalked away, leaving Eliza alone with her trunk and a swirl of onlookers. In that stunned moment, a gentle voice chimed in, Come, my dear, let's get you somewhere proper to rest. Eliza turned to see a kindly older woman with a severe black dress and an understanding smile. I'm Mrs. Holloway, the woman offered, linking her arm with Eliza's in a show of solidarity. Don't you mind that fool Maple Creek might have better to offer than Mr. Wilcox's narrow tastes. Allowing the older woman to guide her, Eliza steeled herself once more. The sun dipped lower, the golden light turning copper, as it lit her path toward the uncharted territory of Maple Creek's hidden truths and perhaps an unforeseen chance at acceptance. Eliza found refuge in the church's small parlor, courtesy of Mrs. Holloway, who seemed to have designated herself as Eliza's guardian angel. The space was modest but clean, with a simple cot pushed against one wall and a small wooden table to the side. In one corner stood a battered piano, its keys gleaming with worn usage. Eliza set her trunk near the cot and finally allowed a trembling breath to escape. Mrs. Holloway's gentle eyes brimmed with sympathy. Bless you, dear, she murmured, placing a cup of tea on the table. I suspect your suitor neglected to mention certain expectations. Eliza forced a wan smile, struggling to maintain composure. He never asked for a photograph, she said softly, and his letters never detailed how narrowly he measured a wife's well silhouette. She felt the sting of fresh tears but swallowed them down. Perhaps it's for the best, she added. If that's how he reacts to me, we wouldn't have had a happy life. Mrs. Holloway nodded vigorously, her severe bun bobbing. You're braver than you know, child. And Maple Creek has more than one merchant. Not all folks share Wilcox's brand of cruelty. You do have a place here if you want it. Eliza clasped her teacup, grateful for the warmth that seeped into her fingers. She recalled the months of scrimping to afford her train fare, the nights spent dreaming of a new start. She wouldn't flee at the first sign of trouble. No, she would remain and find work if she could improve her worth. The thought steadied her. Yes, she said, lifting her gaze resolutely. I won't leave just because one man says I'm not good enough. A soft rap at the door announced Reverend Mills, a thin, grandfatherly figure. Mrs. Holloway, he greeted, then turned to Eliza with kind curiosity. Is everything all right? In a few sentences, Mrs. Holloway explained the humiliating episode at the station. The Reverend's bushy eyebrows knitted in disapproval. "That's appalling," he muttered. "Miss Thompson, the church stands with you. If you need help, there's a small side room you can use for as long as necessary." Eliza's gratitude spilled forth in a trembling smile. She'd scarcely been in Maple Creek a handful of hours yet had discovered pockets of kindness. She excused herself, stepping into the side room the Reverend had indicated. It was little more than a storage closet fitted with a narrow cot, but it was a start. She placed her trunk beside the bed, retrieved her battered journal, and let the surge of feelings tumble onto the page. A swirl of memories assaulted her, her mother's gentle scolding to stand tall, her father's warm laugh whenever she felt insecure, the stares and whispers that followed her since adolescence. Now half a continent away, she faced new stares, new whispers, yet also a fresh chance to define her life on her own terms. By the time she set her pen down, her heartbeat steadied, fueled by a new determination. Tomorrow she resolved she would begin her search for employment in Maple Creek. She'd taught children back east, managed small budgets for local charities. Surely a frontier community had some need for these skills. And if the townsfolk insisted on measuring her by her waistline, well, she'd let her work speak louder than any shallow judgment. Pulling the thin blanket over her shoulders, Eliza lay on the cot. As the last rays of evening light filtered through the window, she exhaled, whispering to the silent room, "I'm staying, you'll see what I can do. Maple Creek. And I'll show myself who I can be." The following morning arrived with a pale sunrise slipping through the church's narrow windows. Eliza braided her hair and brushed the wrinkles from her traveling dress, determined to look as composed as possible. True to her word, she ventured into town seeking shopkeepers and locals in hopes of finding a position. The question repeated over and over. "Are you hiring?" "I'm good with figures, taught school for 3 years in Boston." Some politely declined, others rudely brushed her off. By midday, she had visited the diner, the laundry, the mercantile, and even inquired at a local ranch that needed seasonal help with accounts. Each place cited one reason or another. "We're already set," or "you don't quite fit what we need," or the more underhanded, "Maybe you could see if Wilcox might still have a place for you." Their pitying half-smiles rankled more than outright rejection. Tired and dusty, Eliza found herself drawn to a building on the edge of town. A blacksmith's workshop, next to a stable A sign affixed overhead, read Caldwell Ranch Office Curious. She hesitated. She'd heard mention of a man named Evan Caldwell from Mrs. Holloway. Apparently Caldwell Ranch was the largest property in the region, run by a reclusive, no-nonsense ranch owner, known for fair wages and uncompromising standards. Before she could make a decision, the door swung open and out stepped a tall figure. Even from several yards away, Eliza felt the quiet authority he exuded. He wore well-worn boots and a hat that shaded a face marked by sun and wind. A black horse stood tethered nearby, the saddle's fine craftsmanship hinting at prosperity and care. He paused, scanning the street, then noticed Eliza's scrutiny. Their eyes met briefly. She felt a spark of something, surprise, maybe. She collected herself, turned and walked toward the stable. Inside, she saw a bay mare that reminded her of the few times she'd visited relatives in the country. In her mind, she replayed the humiliations of the morning, the rejections that left her heart raw. Was there truly no place in Maple Creek where her skills might be valued more than her appearance was judged? A moment later, footsteps announced the same tall figure had followed her inside. "Morning," he said, voice carrying a resonant calm. "Looking for someone." She summoned her courage and turned. Up close, she noticed the flecks of gray at his temples, the shadows under his eyes that suggested long hours. "I was just curious if Caldwell Ranch might need a bookkeeper or an accounts manager. I have references in teaching, and I'm adept with numbers." The man studied her. "I'm Evan Caldwell," he offered, removing his hat. "As it happens, I lost my old bookkeeper to the lure of city life." "Are you a local?" Eliza hesitated, scanning his face for traces of prejudice she so often encountered. She caught no mocking spark, only quiet assessment. "I arrived yesterday. My circumstances changed unexpectedly," she said, her voice firm. "But I'm capable, Mr. Caldwell, if you've a mind to hire skill over rumor." He glanced at the stable door where a few passers-by lingered, probably eavesdropping. "I judge by results," he said, "not by hearsay." He gestured toward the small ranch office behind them, mind stepping inside. "We can discuss what I'd require from a new bookkeeper." Relief and caution battled within her. Yet she nodded, following him into the office. The interior was cluttered with ledgers and shipping forms. Evan Caldwell cleared a space on the desk and rifled through a thick ledger. If you could make sense of these lines, he said, that'd be a start. The last fellow left them in disarray. Eliza set aside her hat and smoothed her skirts, preparing for the test. She slid onto a chair, ignoring the creaks of protest from the wood, and began to scan the columns of figures. The more she read, the more she understood the ranch's scope: hundreds of head of cattle, multiple shipments of feed payroll for a sizable crew. By the time she reached the last page, her mind thrummed with solutions. "You're overpaying freight charges," she remarked quietly, tapping a column. "Seems like they're billing you for equipment you never received?" Evan Caldwell leaned over her shoulder, eyes narrowing at the ledger's ink. "So you're certain?" She pointed out the discrepancies with confident fingers. "Absolutely, this would be easy to fix once we reorganize your accounts to track shipments more precisely." A slow smile curved across his lips. "Miss Thompson, you appear to know exactly what you're doing." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. In that moment, the rickety office, the dust swirling through sunlight, the faint smell of horses, they all formed the backdrop to something she'd not felt since arriving in Maple Creek: genuine acceptance. An hour later, Eliza emerged from the ranch office, clutching a worn ledger. Her heart brimming with a cautious excitement. Evan Caldwell had offered her a trial position as caretaker of his accounts and correspondence. He needed someone to manage a wide range of tasks, including payroll and supply orders, enough work to fill days from dawn to dusk. And in what felt like a revelation, he'd barely batted an eye at her figure. Instead, he'd watched her methodically dissect his accounts, and that was all the interview he seemed to require. On her walk back to the church, she sensed the subtle shift in townspeople's gazes. Whether it was from the rumor of her humiliating rejection by Wilcox, or from seeing her speak with Caldwell, who was rumored to hold considerable sway in the region, she couldn't say, but she refused to drop her head. If working for Caldwell gave her a foothold in Maple Creek, she'd own that opportunity with pride. Back in the small parlor of the church, she sat at a table and spread open the ledger. Pages of cramped writing told a tale of a sprawling ranch enterprise that included cattle horses and even side ventures in produce. As she began reorganizing the columns of figures, a quiet peace washed over her. Numbers were honest, they didn't judge her. Footsteps brought Mrs. Holloway into the room. "You look busy, dear." "Something good happened." Eliza smiled, explaining Evan Caldwell's offer. The older woman's eyes lit with a knowing gleam. "He's a decent man, that one, though. Folks say he can be standoffish. If he's trusting you with his books, that's no small measure of confidence." They chatted a while, and Eliza learned Caldwell Ranch was indeed the largest operation around, almost a small kingdom in itself. The general consensus was that Evan Caldwell had built it from scratch after inheriting a patch of worthless land from an uncle. Through tireless dedication, he'd turned it profitable, but the demands had left him solitary. "Never has he shown interest in a wife or even the dances," Mrs. Holloway mused. "But maybe he just needed someone who sees behind the ledgers and the dust." Eliza's cheeks heated, though she quickly protested she wasn't looking for more than a job. But later, alone in her modest church room, she admitted to herself the idea wasn't entirely unwelcome. She found it oddly charming that Caldwell had recognized her skill, first ignoring the superficial judgments that plagued her for so long. And yes, she acknowledged the subtle warmth in his gaze when their eyes met. That night, after completing the first reorganization of Caldwell's accounts, she penned in an entry in her journal. "Dear Mama and Papa, today, a door opened where all I'd found before were walls. Mr. Caldwell saw me not as an object of pity, but a person with capabilities. I can't know how this story ends, but for now I feel the first glow of hope settling onto the cot." She closed her eyes, the ledger's ink still etched in her mind. Tomorrow would bring in new challenges, new sums to tally, and perhaps the start of forging her own place in Maple Creek, free from Wilcox's shadow. Morning found Eliza up before dawn, her excitement a gentle hum beneath her calm exterior. She made the short walk from the church to the stables behind the ranch office, discovering that Evan Caldwell had prepared a horse for her. It was a gentle sorrel mare named Clover, saddled and ready. Eliza's brows rose in surprise. She'd not ridden in years, but evidently Caldwell had decided she would need a mount to tour the property and handle tasks. She pressed a hand to the mare's flank, murmuring soft greetings. Clover snorted lightly, seeming to accept her new rider. A moment later, Caldwell himself emerged from the stable shadows, tacking up a tall bay gelding. "We have a busy day," he greeted with a small nod. "Thought you'd want to see the condition of some outlying fields, So you can factor that into supply orders. Eliza recognized his practicality. She appreciated that he never used the meandering politesse that so many in Boston had employed to cover condescension. With Caldwell, everything was direct from his gaze to his words. She hoisted herself onto Clover, ignoring the faint twinge of self-consciousness. If Caldwell noticed the extra effort it took for her to mount, he gave no sign. Instead, he led the way out of Maple Creek, the early sunlight gilding the grasslands in a gentle glow. They rode in companionable silence for a while, crossing low creeks and climbing gentle rises that overlooked acres of pasture. The wind carried the scent of sage and distant mesquite. Fires reminding Eliza how far she'd come from Boston's harbor. Stench and carriage clatter. Caldwell occasionally pointed to a fence line that needed mending, or a patch of soil he suspected was losing fertility. She made mental notes, her brain already calculating solutions. Eventually, they reached a stretch of land that marked Caldwell Ranch's boundary. Eliza could see why this place had a reputation for mightiness. It sprawled as far as the eye could see, with grazing cattle dotting the rolling fields like brown specks. They paused on a small bluff, letting the horses rest. Caldwell broke the silence. "You do well in the saddle. Clover trusts you." Eliza felt a shy warmth. "I'm a bit rusty, but I grew up visiting my uncle's farm in summers. I guess the muscle memory's still there." He nodded, casting a sidelong glance at her. "You seem to adapt quickly to everything here. My scattered ledgers, the town's sideways looks." "That can't be easy." A shadow crossed Eliza's face. Memories of Wilcox's public rejection and the tittering stares flashed through her mind. "It's not," she admitted, "but I didn't come all this way to let gossip define me. Maple Creek can judge all it wants. I have work to do." His smile was subtle but genuine. "I respect that I had my share of naysayers when I first started building this ranch from near wasteland. Sometimes the best answer to ridicule is quiet success." Eliza's gaze swept the horizon. Quiet success indeed. The power of perseverance in the face of scorn. She understood it intimately, and she realized with a start that Caldwell recognized that fight in her. For a moment, she felt a strange kinship. People who'd battled assumptions to carve out something that belonged solely to them. They resumed their ride, heading back toward the ranch. With each steady hoofbeat, Eliza felt an anchor of belonging drop deeper into Maple Creek's soil. She might still face rumors, disapproval, even sabotage from Wilcox or others who disliked her presence. But she had found an ally in Caldwell and a sense of purpose in the ledgers and tasks that proved her ability. And as day pressed on, that anchored sense only grew stronger, planning her future firmly on the wide, unending plains. A month slipped by in a swirl of figures, fence repairs, horse feed, orders, and newly found rhythms. Each morning, Eliza helped Caldwell's foreman tally supplies, then assisted in organizing wages for the ranch hands. Afternoons she spent poring over letters from potential buyers of the ranch's cattle or discussing deals with traveling merchants. Evening often saw her and Caldwell rechecking numbers or quietly sharing coffee in the ranch office. If townsfolk still gossiped about a single woman working closely with a wealthy rancher, neither she nor Caldwell mentioned it. There was, however, an undercurrent of tension she couldn't ignore. On more than one occasion, she noticed Caldwell exchanging sharp words with men who arrived unannounced, wealthy landowners from neighboring counties. Their expressions held disapproval or veiled hostility when they spotted Eliza. Caldwell never explained these confrontations, only calling them business disagreements, but her intuition whispered that something deeper lay beneath. It all came to a head one afternoon when Eliza took a brief ride into Maple Creek to collect some documents from the telegraph office. Dismounting outside the mercantile, she caught sight of Philip Wilcox stepping onto the boardwalk. The instant he recognized her, his face twisted with the same scornful shock as the day she arrived. Yet he said nothing, merely scurried off in the opposite direction, leaving an odd hush in his wake. The tension in the air felt palpable. Inside the mercantile, Mr. Granger, the shopkeeper, greeted Eliza politely. While she gathered her supplies, she overheard two local matrons whispering behind a stack of flour sacks. "I hear Caldwell's new bookkeeper is influencing his decisions. He's turned down that land swap from Wilcox. More than that, heard she's sassing bigger powers." "Bigger powers," repeated the other, wide-eyed. Eliza's pulse thrummed. She quietly paid for her items and left without drawing attention to herself. That half-heard conversation was enough to confirm her suspicions. Her presence or her independence irritated not just Wilcox, but others who coveted Caldwell's holdings or his railroad connections. If Caldwell used her counsel to push back on their deals, She was now a threat to them. Returning to Caldwell Ranch, she found Caldwell outside the barn, arms folded, gaze distant. "Something's amiss," he murmured before she could speak. "Remember that out-of-county investor Russell who visited? He's stirring trouble about the ranch's expansions, claiming we're not following town guidelines. A few well-placed rumors might block our upcoming contract with the railroad. We can't prove it's him behind it, but he's connected to Wilcox, among others." Eliza felt a chill. This was no simple bickering. Big opportunities hinged on Caldwell's reputation, and those who wanted a piece of the railroad's potential wealth had discovered an easy target: the large woman whose unorthodox presence might undercut Caldwell's social standing. "I'm so sorry," she said softly, lowering her gaze. She felt an ache that she might be dragging Caldwell into the crosshairs of local politics. But he shook his head. Expression fierce. "You have nothing to apologize for. If they think they can manipulate me by attacking you, they're in for a rude awakening." That resolve blazed as they walked inside side by side. The ranch hands parted to let them pass, many tipping hats respectfully. The men had grown to appreciate Eliza's no-nonsense approach. Her knack for finalizing wages that were always correct, and her calm presence when storms or emergencies arose. That evening, while checking the day's tallies, Eliza and Caldwell lingered over their usual coffee. She ventured, "If Russell and Wilcox push harder, if they sabotage your operation." Caldwell's hand came down gently over hers, stilling the anxious drumming of her fingers. "We'll handle it together," he assured, voice quietly firm. "We'll outwork, outsmart them. No matter what they say about you, about us. My trust in you stands." Her breath caught at the final words. "My trust in you stands," all at once. Eliza felt the swirl of fear recede, replaced by warmth. In the flicker of lantern light, she saw Caldwell's gaze steady and earnest. For a moment, she envisioned the unstoppable alliance they formed: a woman once despised for her size, a rancher guarded by caution, both forging a partnership that defied the self-appointed gatekeepers of Maple Creek. Just days later, Eliza nearly lost her life. It happened at dawn when she saddled Clover for a quick inspection ride along the ranch's northern boundary. Caldwell was out back dealing with a broken fence, unaware. Eliza mounted and urged Clover into a gentle trot. The air carried a soft crispness, hinting at autumn. Halfway to the boundary, Clover began acting strangely, tossing her head, shifting her weight. Eliza dismounted to check the girth and discovered a horrifying sight. The strap had been partly cut, and the rest was on the verge of snapping. Had she picked up more speed, the entire saddle could have come loose, toppling her beneath the hooves. Her heart hammered as she realized it wasn't wear and tear. Someone had sabotaged her tack. With trembling hands, she led Clover back toward the ranch. Halfway there, she saw Caldwell riding hard to meet her, a look of alarm etched on his face. He slid off his horse, scanning her in a rush. "Eliza, are you hurt?" he demanded, eyes flashing with desperation. She shook her head, stepping aside to show him the cut strap. "I caught it just in time." Caldwell's expression darkened to a thundercloud. "This is no accident. Someone meant you harm." Eliza pressed a hand over her roiling stomach, horror dawning that if she galloped, she might be crushed. They glanced around, no sign of an intruder, but the message was clear. Wilcox, Russell, or their men had escalated from whisper campaigns to active attempts on her safety. Mrs. Holloway, alerted by a ranch hand, arrived on a buckboard and gasped at the sight of the ruined saddle. "This is monstrous," she exclaimed. "I never thought they'd stoop so low." Caldwell gently guided Eliza into the ranch office, where she sank into a chair. He paced, fury emanating from every step. "I'll ride into town, confront them if I must. This can't stand." But Eliza grabbed his arm. "Don't. That's what they want, for you to lash out. We need proof, and we must keep calm, because if we raise a scene without evidence, they'll twist it against us." Caldwell's gaze flickered with grudging agreement. "All right, we'll do this your way." Smart, within the hour, a handful of Caldwell's most trusted men scoured the barn for signs of forced entry, while Eliza helped them document every piece of evidence. They found faint footprints in the dirt near Clover's stall, too smudged for identification. Before dusk, an unexpected visitor arrived. Thomas Gardner, pale-faced, he admitted. He'd overheard Russell boasting about sending a message to keep Caldwell in line. "I never intended it to go this far," Gardner stammered. "I only told him Miss Thompson's routine. Thought it might scare her away, not kill her. I'm sorry." Eliza stood rigid, a swirl of anger and weariness fueling her. "What do you have?" she asked, voice ice-edged. "Surely you have more than an apology." Gardner nodded, producing letters from Russell and Wilcox implicating them in a scheme to sabotage Caldwell Ranch if Eliza wouldn't leave. The conspiracy was laid bare. exhaling shaky relief. Eliza locked eyes with Caldwell. They had what they needed, proof, but relief came tempered by the knowledge that their enemies were desperate and dangerous. By the next morning, Maple Creek buzzed with rumors. Word had leaked about the sabotage, about Gardner's confession, about Russell's letters. Everyone waited for Caldwell's next move. He and Eliza gathered at the small town hall, flanked by a sympathetic sheriff who declared he'd read the evidence thoroughly. A crowd jammed the council chamber. Ranchers, storekeepers, local matrons with tense faces. At a prominent table sat Russell and Wilcox, their expressions uncertain but defiant. The mayor, a portly man in an ill-fitting suit, cleared his throat to begin. "We're here to address allegations of sabotage against Miss Eliza Thompson and the Caldwell Ranch. The charges also concerned attempts to coerce or blackmail Mr. Evan Caldwell." As the hush settled, Russell's lawyer leapt up, protesting. These claims were mere fabrications. Wilcox, red-faced, tried to deny any wrongdoing. But once the sheriff produced the letters complete with signatures and references to encouraging the lady to depart permanently, the room erupted in furious murmurs. Caldwell stood tall and composed. He spoke in a level tone that cut through the noise. "I've built this ranch through honest deals. If the railroad or Maple Creek's future is at stake, I want no part of shady alliances. Miss Thompson is my valued partner and—" He paused as though checking his words. "She is more than a bookkeeper to me. If anyone attempts to harm her or pressure me to remove her, they'll face the law." Eliza's heart pounded at his public defense, her cheeks warming under the gaze of the crowd. She steeled herself and stepped forward, adding in her own voice, "I came here to build a life, not to meddle in small-town politics. But these men felt threatened by a woman who refuses to be shamed away from what she loves. That's their crime, attempted violence to guard their selfish ambitions." A wave of approval rippled through many bystanders. Even those who had once whispered about Eliza's size or her supposed unsuitability now recognized the cruelty at play. The sheriff advanced, clasping Russell's shoulder. "I have enough to hold you for conspiracy. Let's go." As Russell sputtered, Wilcox made a final frantic attempt to save face. It was never supposed to kill her. "I only thought she was unfit for Caldwell. Ranch that she'd hamper him, ruin future deals." Eliza studied him with a mix of anger and pity. "You tried to ruin my life to protect your illusions. Mr. Wilcox, let's see how illusions hold up in a courtroom." The mayor hammered his gavel, calling for order. "We'll proceed with formal charges, Mr. Wilcox and Mr. Russell. You'll have the chance to defend yourselves in a lawful hearing. Meanwhile, Miss Thompson and Mr. Caldwell, please accept Maple Creek's apologies for this fiasco." With that, the conspirators were led away, and the council meeting dissolved in a flurry of chatter. Eliza felt a wave of shaky relief. Caldwell guided her to a quiet corner, pressing a hand on her shoulder. "You were remarkable," he said, voice low. "I've never seen them so unified in condemnation. It's as if the entire town realized what you endured." Eliza inhaled, letting the tension seep out. "All I did was show them. I wasn't backing down." Mrs. Holloway approached, clasping Eliza's hands. "Look at you, dear," a far cry from the trembling girl fresh off that train. "I'd say Maple Creek just learned a good lesson about not underestimating you." Behind them, a throng of supportive townspeople waited to offer apologies or words of praise, or simply to stand in solidarity. The hush of open acceptance at last was deafening. That night, Eliza sat in Caldwell's ranch office, the hush of the night broken only by the gentle crackle of a lantern. Caldwell was there, leaning against the desk, arms folded in a posture of relief. She stared at him, overwhelmed by the sense that they'd emerged from a storm. He caught her gaze, and in that look, she sensed his gratitude and something deeper. "Yes," she breathed, answering an unspoken question. "We faced it, and we won." He stepped closer, quietly cupping her cheek. "Eliza, with the trouble behind us, I don't want you thinking it was all business." His lips curved into a soft smile. "I've grown, well, quite certain that her heartbeat soared. They had survived sabotage, scorn, and hush-hush conspiracies against all odds. A new frontier beckoned, one shaped by trust, not fear." The wedding took place in Maple Creek's modest church on a bright, windswept afternoon. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, coloring the pews with gentle hues of red and blue. Eliza stood at the entrance, wearing a gown fashioned from sturdy but elegant cloth chosen for comfort, as much as aesthetics. Mrs. Holloway and a few other local women had insisted on helping her sew it, ensuring it celebrated her curves instead of concealing them. The result was a gown that made Eliza feel both regal and unquestionably herself. Seated at the organ was an elderly ranch hand's wife, playing a heartfelt rendition of a classical piece Eliza recognized from her Boston days. In the front pew, a handful of ranch employees wore their Sunday best, beaming, as though they were witnessing a personal victory. Even the mayor and several council members who once turned a blind eye to Wilcox's plots were their heads bowed in respect. Evan Caldwell stood at the altar clad in a sharply tailored suit that highlighted the broad shoulders Eliza had grown accustomed to seeing in worn work shirts. For a moment she observed him quietly, recalling the first time she spied him in the stable, that commanding but fair presence that had extended her a chance. Now it was he who appeared nervous. Eyes flicking to hers with a mixture of joy and raw emotion, Eliza stepped forward, heart pounding in rhythm with the organ's chords. Each step down the aisle felt like a final dissolution of every whispered condemnation she'd endured. She reached Evan's side, meeting his gentle smile. The music ceased, and Reverend Mills cleared his throat with a warm grin. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we gather to unite Evan Caldwell and Eliza Thompson in matrimony, a union forged not by superficial judgments, but by shared trials, mutual respect, and abiding devotion." Evan took Eliza's hands, his calluses meeting her own. In a voice trembling with sincerity, he said, "Eliza, from the day you walked into my ranch office, you've been more than a bookkeeper. You are my partner, my friend, and I vow to love you without reservation. Thank you for teaching me that trust and honesty can break any barrier." Tears pricked Eliza's eyes, but she spoke clearly, refusing to let emotion muddle her vow. "Evan, you saw my worth when so many refused to look beyond surface. You gave me a place here in this town, at this ranch, and in your heart, I promise to stand by you in prosperity and adversity, to champion your dreams as you champion mine, and to believe in us." Reverend Mills pronounced them husband and wife, and the kiss they shared was both tender and triumphant. The church erupted in applause. Mrs. Holloway dabbed at tears, the ranch hands let out rowdy cheers, and even the mayor rose to clap with genuine warmth. A lively reception followed. Outside, tables groaned under potluck dishes contributed by neighbors. The blacksmith had crafted a decorative horseshoe arch, and the stable hands had even decorated Clover's stall with ribbons. As Eliza circulated, receiving well wishes, she marveled at how acceptance had spread in place of scorn. People complimented her cooking, asked her about bookkeeping tips, and teased Evan that he'd lost the single most capable woman in the territory to marriage. Later in the evening, the newlyweds slipped away from the crowd, strolling hand in hand to the edge of Caldwell Ranch. A gentle breeze ruffled Eliza's hair. Carrying with it the hush of dusk, Evan drew her close, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. "You changed everything here, you know," he murmured. She smiled, leaning against his solid warmth. "We changed it together." They gazed over the rolling fields, once a place that symbolized isolation for a guarded man and uncertainty for an outcast woman. Now it was home, a living testament to the power of resilience and compassion. Tomorrow they would resume ranch duties, check accounts, ride the boundaries, but tonight belonged to them, to the fulfillment of a promise that started with a bold decision, a leap of faith, and an unyielding determination to claim the life they deserved. Looking back, Eliza sees how her resilience and courage worked hand in hand to shape the life she now leads. By refusing to let others' shallow judgments define her, she found a partner who admired not only her mind, but the very spirit she'd always been told to hide. Together they showed Maple Creek that appearances do not determine ability or lovability. Heart and character do. In the end, their greatest triumph wasn't merely outsmarting a vindictive rival or winning over a stubborn town, but building a future where understanding and acceptance prevail. When we stand firm in who we are, possibilities stretch as wide as a Texas sky. Did any part of Eliza's journey resonate with you? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more uplifting, heartfelt stories, where the bravest hearts always find their deserved happily ever after.